So welcome to my interviewing in tech workshop in partnership with BLIX. And just as a bit of background as to how I got involved in BLIX, Maria's already aware, I gave her my life story already, but um, the founder, Carl, used to work at Google. And it was about 7 years ago where he and I were actually on a panel by chance together on a stage talking about Google and working at Google and interviewing at Google. So it's funny how 7 years later, I'm doing exactly the same thing again with his organization. So very happy to be here. Very quick introduction to myself. This is me at Google. Everyone has to have one fun fact about themselves as mandatory. So my fun fact is I've climbed Mount Fuji twice. And there's a Japanese proverb, he who climbs Mount Fuji is a wise man, he who climbs it twice is a fool. So I'll definitely let you conclude that piece for me. I definitely would recommend doing it once. Twice? Yeah, have a think, have a think. So moving on, this is my path to Google. So after graduation, I graduated a very, very long time ago. I went to teach English in Japan for a couple of years, which was amazing. It wasn't what I wanted to do in my career. I wanted to travel. So I did that for a couple of years. I came back to the UK and did a few internships. And actually, in fact, I wanted to get into advertising at the time. So a lot of unpaid internships, sleeping on friends' sofas in London, that sort of stuff. Trying to get my big break into advertising. But actually got an offer to join a recruitment consultancy. And what attracted me about it was that it was a meritocracy, right? You got rewarded appropriately for how much effort you put in. That's what I was told anyway. But either way, I fell into recruitment, did it for a few years, and then joined a tech startup. Now, this would have been 2011. So I'm not sure how easy it is to think back to 2011. This was when Facebook was relatively small. Twitter just got started. There was no WhatsApp. YouTube was about 5 years old, I think. Mobile phones are not as advanced as they were now. So basically what I'm trying to say is tech, and specifically social media, was still in its infancy. It was still growing, right, at early stages. So I joined a startup at a time called Wildfire. Now, this was a company which I didn't know much about, but it sounded really cool. I wanted to put my hand up for it. I got the job. We were 15 people in a small basement in Covent Garden, right? And it was a very different time, but fast growing. So we grew the team in London from 15 people to 50 in 12 months. And then we had an announcement. Someone was buying our company, and that company was Google. You know, massive celebration. Everyone's super happy. We've done so well. Google's acquired our company. It took me about 20 minutes to go, oh, wait, normally when you acquire a company, who's let go? Finance, recruiting, legal. They take the engineering talent or they take the sales talent, but maybe some of the support functions they wouldn't take. Now, thankfully, amazingly, we were all moved across to Google. And so I recognized that my journey into Google is not usual. It's very unusual. And so my mentality joining Google was, well, let's make the most of it, right? It's a great company, some of the greatest people in their fields. Let's learn as much as possible. So fast forward 9 years, and here I am today, still at Google, 9 years later. So I'll stop there. That's a very sort of brief recap of how I got to where I am now. It's a mixture of both luck. You need luck for sure. Like everybody has a bit of luck in their journey sometimes, right? But equally, putting your hand up for opportunities opens doors as well, and taking a few risks. Okay. So moving on. Today's session, I am really looking forward to pulling back the curtain on interviewing in tech and busting some of the myths. Now you're probably thinking, why Rob? Why should I listen to Rob about pulling back the curtain, busting the myths? Because I recruit for Google, right? So I've Me and my team have been responsible for hiring hundreds of people across different parts of the business over the last 9 years. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the learnings I have, right? That I would even apply to myself if I ever decide to leave Google and interview somewhere else. I would follow exactly the same sort of rules. So hopefully you will find this really useful as well. Okay. Let's start with the myths. Myth number 1. Prep up on some brain teasers. Can anyone in this call answer how many marbles fit into a Mini Cooper? Now, the reason why I put this under myths is, if you watch certain TV shows or films, they will ask, the characters always ask, if you're shrunk to the size of, 2 centimeters, put into a blender, how would you escape the blender? We do not ask those sort of questions in tech. I can't deny that we used to before, a long, long time ago. But for now, no. And the reason why, at least at Google, is there's a lot of research been done to try and link. If I do really well in a brain teaser question, does it have any predictive power on me doing a good job in the role? There's zero predictive power. It's completely random. So if it has no bearing on how well I'm going to do in the job, what's the point of asking it? The only point of asking it is to make me as an interviewer feel big, right? There's no value in that. And so at least for us, the questions that we ask are always job related, okay? I'm not going to ask you something random. The questions are still tough. Don't get me wrong, they're still tough, but they're always going to be related to the job that you'll be doing or the values that we're looking for, right? Or the teamwork or leadership behaviors we're looking for. Okay, so that's myth number 1. No more brain teasers. Do not, and if anybody does experience being asked a brain teaser, I would ask the interviewer, what are you looking for with this answer? And see what they say. Right, let's move on. Myth number 2. Everybody in tech comes from a super academic background. They all come from Oxbridge or whatever it is. They've all got, X, Y, and Z. Of course, we do have a lot of people, right, from academic institutions. Of course we do. But to say everybody that we hire comes from them is absolutely false. And the reason why for this is there's a big drive across the whole tech industry at the moment to reflect our users, right? If you reflect your user base, you can best sell the right products, develop the right products, and serve your users. If you don't reflect your users, how can you best deliver the best products for them? Which is why when we hire, we really need to make sure we're hiring from a diverse pool of candidates and applications. If everybody came from the same background, even if that background is highly regarded, everyone's going to think the same. If you think the same, you cannot be innovative. You cannot spot problems. You cannot break things. You need to spot problems, have a different perspective, to argue, right? To break things down and start again. That's how you innovate. So that's why it's really important for us, not just from an ethical or moral point of view, from a business point of view, we really need to reflect all of our users, which is everybody at Google, right? So that's the second myth to debunk. Finally, the third myth. I need to have won an Olympic medal, speak 5 languages, have an MBA to be hired in tech. Similar to myth number 2, this is not the case. Again, I cannot deny that maybe 10, 15 years ago, right, there might have been more emphasis on something like this. The tech industry as it is today, you do not need to be an Olympian. You do not need to be a chess master. You do not need to be X, Y, and Z, right, to be hired into tech. And how this reflects on you as a candidate is, please do not exaggerate or inflate, right, achievements. Just be yourself. That's enough. That's enough. You haven't won an Olympic medal. That's okay, right? You don't need to be these sort of things. But what you need to be, and I'll touch upon this later on, is comfortable in ambiguity, right? There are no rules, there are no processes. Am I comfortable or am I getting really stressed? I need rules, I need structure. Most of the time in tech, there is no structure. It's very fast moving, it's very dynamic. If you prefer a more rigid, structured environment, tech probably isn't for you. Definitely not Google anyway. So yeah, being comfortable in ambiguous situations, you need to think and act like an owner, right? So yes, I'm new. I've only been here 2 months and there's lots of senior people there, but I spot a problem. Am I going to be quiet or am I going to try and fix it? Am I going to act like an owner, right, and fix it? It's my problem. I want to fix it. That's really important. So those are some of the things that you do need to have versus some of the other stuff. And so the final point here is think about your competency versus your credential, right? Forget about the big brand names, forget about the big schools. What are your competencies? What are your skills? And how do you show that when you're applying for a job or when you're interviewing versus the big name stuff? Okay. So I'll stop there for a second. That's sort of the myth busting piece done. Right? So you know what the myths are. Let's say you really want to get into tech. How do I go about it? Right, let's go for it. Okay, tips for interviewing in tech. Everything starts with your CV, right? I know I'm being very basic here, but let me share some of my advice about a CV when applying for tech. And of course, it would depend on the particular role, the particular company. This is general advice for a CV. Number one, 1 to 2 pages max. People often ask me this. It's a very simple question, simple answer. 1 to 2 pages max. If you have 3, 4, 5, certain countries, especially in the EMEA region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, depends on the country. Some do go longer, but generally speaking, for a tech company, 1 to 2 pages max. Why? Why is that the case? Well, that's because you need to be as concise as possible. Use bullet points liberally. Again, why is this the case? Why do I need to be concise? Well, for an average tech recruiter, they spend maximum 30 seconds per CV. At Google, we receive millions of applications. It's impossible to spend more than 30 seconds, right, on every CV. So if you know a recruiter is only spending maximum 30 seconds on your CV, you need to be concise. You need to show them what they're looking for. Okay. The next one, no spelling, formatting mistakes. You might think, well, obviously, but it's actually quite important because tech companies often find that if a CV does have a few mistakes on there, it shows a lack of detail, which is taken relatively seriously, I would say, in tech companies. You need to show that if the thinking is, if you can't see mistakes in your old CV, how can you spot a mistake in a product or important documentation or something like that, right? So there's no real excuse really to have mistakes on your CV, right? Tailor your CV to each application. Do not copy and paste the same CV to every company because you will leave something on there which is not relevant for that company. I would love to join Facebook and you've applied to Google, right? So please do tailor each copy for each company you're applying for. It's really, really important. And it goes back to what the recruiter wants to see because each job description will be different. It will use different language. It's asking for the same thing, but it's different language. So change your language to match the job description, right? The team at Google is called the recruitment specialist team. In Facebook, it might be called the staffing team. Those small differences, right, really help. Okay. Accomplish X as measured by Y by doing Z. What this means is when you're writing stuff in your CV, I've done this, I've done this, I've done that. That's fine, but it means nothing to me as a recruiter. I need to know why it's important. Okay, so the example is, I've done this. This was the outcome. This was the benefit, or this was the impact, right? And this is how we measured that impact. Very quick example, I've actually put it in the deck, is, if you're applying for a finance role, let's say, I implemented a new system. Fine, what does that mean? Taking it one level more, I implemented a new system that saved, I don't know, $13,000 per year, right? Taking it one step further, I implemented a new system that saved $13,000 and was rolled out across all the regions. To see how the same thing, if you expand it, can have a lot more impact for a recruiter when they're going through your CV. So every line that you have in your CV, just think about, why is this important? Why would a recruiter care about this bit? Think about the outcome and how you measured the outcome. Okay. And then finally, the overarching point is catch the recruiter's eye. 30 seconds, next CV, 30 seconds, next CV, 30 seconds, next CV. What's different about you? I'm not talking crazy colors. I'm not talking a big A4 picture of yourself. You don't need that sort of stuff. But have a think about, okay, this is a job I'm applying for. This is what they've asked for. How can I show I've got everything they want in the first 2 pages? So really try and catch that recruiter's eye to make them want to call you and take you through to the next round. Okay, so that's the CV piece. It's a bit of a fast tour in terms of my best practices as a recruiter reviewing CVs, what I'm looking for. So in my mind, I already have what I'm looking for. I'm basically looking for 3 or 4 things. As a recruiter, I don't memorize the whole job description, but I have 3 or 4 most important things I'm looking for. When I go to a CV, it'll be the very first page, and it's either your most recent experience or your introduction. Okay. And so my own CV, if you're wondering what I do, is before I even talk about my most recent experience, I have 5 points at the top. And those 5 points will always be what I see in the job spec, what they're asking for. So they're asking for team management experience, international recruitment experience, sourcing capability, blah, 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 blah. I make sure those are the 5 things at the very top. So they see that, and that's the hook. Okay, he's got exactly the 3 or 4 things I want. What else does he have? So that'd be my advice. Recruitment, I hope, will always be both the science and the art. So there are tools that can help automate certain things, but in terms of reviewing whether someone's good for a job or not, at Google at least, it's still very much done by hand. That's the old-fashioned part. So we have whole teams literally going through all of the applications to make sure we don't miss anything. Whether that changes down the line, who knows, right? That's the whole point with AI and stuff. But at the moment, people have taken the time to apply. We need to review it with people. So yeah. So let's say you've got your CV, you've applied, you get a response. Hey, we'd like to give you a call. Let's chat about your application. Great news. What's next? Okay. So in the time between, right, your preparation time, again, I might sound really like Captain Obvious here. Please do your prep. I've interviewed so many candidates who've obviously just freestyled it, right? Either they've been too busy to prep, they think they can do it 5 minutes before. It shows. It really does show. So please take the time to do your prep. Now, what I would say though is that there is danger of over prepping. Okay, you don't want to prep so much that you get anxious and your mind is running a million miles per hour. What happens if they ask me this? That doesn't help you. Okay, it doesn't help you at all. So be careful not to over prep. There is a difference, right, in terms of how you prep for just a phone interview versus a face-to-face interview on site with someone from the team. What I would say for a phone interview is just know that you have, again, a relatively short amount of time. Typically what, 10 minutes, 15, 20? Very rarely 30. To convince the person interviewing you, they should invite you into the office or organize a video call in these times. So be wary of giving your life story. That's a common mistake. I go, hey, I'm Rob. This is my quick intro. Love to learn more about you. And then often I don't speak for 10 minutes because then the candidate is giving me their life story for 10 minutes. I haven't asked for a life story. I just said, tell me a bit about yourself. And that, to me as a recruiter, is testing their listening skills, right? And their intuition. I've talked for 10 minutes straight. Is that a good thing or not? Some research was done at Google to show that when you're presenting, 7 minutes is the max someone can hold their attention to what you're saying. Okay, 7 minutes max. Any more than that, people just can't concentrate anymore. Knowing that, pause, stop. Any feedback, any questions? You've noticed I've done that quite a few times, just to keep you guys fresh. On-site interviews, a little bit different. Okay, you've gone past the phone interview. They think you're worthy or worth bringing in. So then these other points then apply. All right, so plan to arrive early. Take it from me, from personal experience. Yes, public transport can be efficient. Yes, the train says it will arrive on that time. Don't trust it. Plan to be there at least 30 minutes early. You just save yourself that hassle of rushing in. Oh my God, I've got 1 minute left. I'm hot, I'm flushed. You're not going to help yourself. And if anything, this is the one part you do have control over. And look, I put my hand up. I've been there before. I've left it literally 30 seconds before arriving through the doors. It doesn't help. Really simple start, but it makes a difference, worth repeating. Finally, wear something comfortable. I've had lots of people ask me, when we interview at Google in the office, what should we wear? I say wear whatever you want, within reason, within legal laws, right? People, I think, get a bit too fixated on that in tech. In tech, at least the tech company's worth joining. They won't care what you're wearing. So wear something that's comfortable and that's you, okay? I've had people rocking on flip-flops, t-shirt and shorts, and absolutely blowing us all away. And that's totally okay. And it's not just the fact that it's buying into the whole tech stereotype, I'm in tech, I'm lying on a beanbag, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. That's the main thing. So then, okay, you've got the interview, you've done your prep, you arrived early, you're wearing something comfortable. This is where the hard work starts. You're in the interview, right? You're in, and it can feel really intimidating, right? You're being brought around some various corridors into a room, you sit down, and it's just you and the interviewer, and they're looking at you. Okay, what do I do? In the interview, number one, breathe. Again, so simple, but I have been in interviews where I thought the candidate was hyperventilating. They were literally panicking. I'm like, it's okay. I'm not here to trip you up, right? I'm here to learn about you. And this is a conversation. This is not an examination. Do remember to breathe. And I think, look, you've done your prep, hopefully. All right, so you should feel confident that you know what you're talking about. Because after all, this interview is about you. And who's the best person who knows about themselves? You, right? So you should feel really confident that you can talk about yourself. Onto a wider point. Don't rush in and start answering all of their questions. Right, this ties into the breathe part. So candidate, tell me about a time when X, Y, and Z. The temptation is to go, well, blah, 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 blah. Pause. Breathe. Double check what you've heard is correct. Because there have been times when I've asked a question, the candidate thought they heard something and spent 10 minutes talking about something else. I can't get those 10 minutes back. It's done now. Move on. So breathe, use your prep, take your time, be ready, but be ready for the unexpected as well, which is my point earlier of you can't over prep, right? There's so many questions that we can ask you. And trust me, at Google, we have a lot of questions we can ask you. It's always going to be random. You can't possibly prep for every single one of those. My advice is have 3 to 4 core examples that you're really proud of, that you can apply to different situations to show different things. 3 to 4, that's it, right? A time when you resolve conflicts, a time when you use data to solve a problem, a time when you showed leadership amongst peers and you didn't have official authority, a time when you did the right thing when it was really hard to do the right thing. Have an example showing each of those values, behaviors, abilities. That's all you need. You do not need to memorize answers to 20 questions. You'll just hurt yourself doing that. Okay. Ask questions. If I'm an interviewer, I'm not just a passive robot writing down what you're saying. I'm actively listening and assessing. Use me, use the interviewer, right? So interviewer, you said this example of this case study. What do you mean by that? Try to understand the parameters of the question, right? You've asked me about a company, this, what sort of size? Is it just EMEA? Is it now? Is it before? Try to understand what they're trying to get at before you give them an answer. Don't assume. So use the interviewer to find out what the problem actually is rather than assume. Finally, super simple point, be yourself. You're only hurting yourself if you try to show behaviors or show values, or even speak differently to how you normally do. It only hurts you because that stuff will come out in the end, either on a CV or in the interview. You shouldn't exaggerate or inflate. That stuff does get found out down the line. Okay, and I think if you've been yourself and you haven't got the job, then it's not the right time. That's it. It's not the right time, right? Try again another time. I think a script, in my opinion, would be a negative, because it's not really you, really. It's not you in the moment, right? Not to get too sort of cheesy about it. I'm trying to understand how would you react to either a really tricky situation, a challenging situation, or a situation that will really test you. And so if it's a script, is that really you? The authenticity piece, right? So of course, there are a few talking points you can have in your head that would trigger specific lines you want to share or a specific point you want to share. But yeah, that's the danger, as I said, of being over prepared, which we can spot pretty quickly and early on. And I think just from a human to human point of view, like I'm taking time to learn about you. I want to learn about you, not a script that you've had prepared in the past. So you've been asked, tell me about a time when, and then you answer, well, this is when I did this. Keep in mind that 7-minute rule. If you're going for longer than 7 minutes, stop, right? Just go, am I giving you what you want? Am I on the right track here? Do you have any questions about this? There's no problem stopping halfway through and going, like, is this what you want to hear? Is this what you're asking? That's number one. And then number two, yes, the STAR method or all of these other methods that are out there. Basically, what I want to hear is, what was the context, right? What did you do? And this is a mistake a lot of people do. They always say, we did this. Well, no, I want to hear about you. I did this. I did that. And finally, the most common mistake is stopping there. This is the context. This is what I did, and then stopping. And I'm like, wait, this is like a movie, like the cliffhanger. What happened then? What was the outcome? What's the whole point of the story that you just told me? Right? So this is the context. I did this, and I improved this process by X%. Or I rolled it out to the Americas, right? Or whatever it is. That's the most important piece, and something actually at Google we really, really look for during the interviews. Just tying it all together at the end is really important. But if you can, within that 7-minute limit, and feel free to stop to check in the meantime. Yeah, great question. Anything else? Otherwise, we can move on to the final piece that I have before we open up for Q&A, because I realize I'm looking at the clock and I'm already talking for 43 minutes, is how to ace interviews in tech with Google as a case study. Okay, so if we use Google as a case study, what are some of the tips that I can share? I'm not going to give you all of the questions that I ask, of course not, but I'm going to give you all of the things that I would advise, right? A candidate, any candidate applying for Google, I'll give this sort of advice to do. Okay. So number one, the online review by a human being, right, who's reviewing your application. Follow the tips that I gave in the CV section. Equally, if you do know somebody in the company as well, that can often be a little bit of a quicker way to get to the eyes of a recruiter. Okay, so you have a network of folks who, even if they're not at the company today, but used to be in that company, drop them a message on LinkedIn or whatever it is and go, hey, I'm really curious about this company. Do you have any contacts you can share? And this touches upon a broader point in tech, that build up a network of champions. Someone that you worked with 10 years ago could really help you out 10 years later, right? And you haven't spoken for years. But if you leave a good impression and do good work with them, that memory never leaves, right? And they will always be your champion down the line. Now, I do recognize that it's a lot easier said than done to have networks in tech. It's not easy at all, I know. So if you don't, do not worry, because even then, the folks that we hire, who've come through a referral or whatever, is not as large, right, as the wider pool of applications. But if you do know someone, do not be shy in using it. The phone interview, okay. Typically at Google, 20, 30 minutes of a phone interview with a recruiter. Remember, this is a recruiter. This is not a software engineer. This is not a marketer. This is not a salesperson, right? They're a recruiter. So all they care about is it worth bringing this person to the next round, to the face-to-face, okay? There's been a lot of mistakes from candidates who, they assume that I've been a technical person and they've gone on for things, but I'm not really looking for, right? What I'm looking for is these 3 or 4 points I have in my mind. Hit those points. That's your job done for the phone interview, okay? Next is the on-site interviews or face-to-face interviews. And again, I'm sharing stuff which is publicly out there, so I'm not sort of sharing sort of deep, dark secrets, but at Google, we typically assess 4 attributes at this stage, okay? The first one is your general problem-solving ability. I'm not talking about, whether you're a genius or your IQ level. I'm talking about, this is a problem. How do I approach this problem, okay? And how you would approach the problem, hopefully, is I don't just go straight into trying to fix it. I want to try and understand what the problem is first. Yeah, understand what the problem is, collect as much data as I can about it. Once I feel confident, I know as much about the problem as possible, then I start thinking about a solution. Okay, and also that solution, there's typically no right or wrong solution, but how clearly am I explaining my solution? Am I bringing the listener on with me as I explain it, or have I completely lost them? Okay, so that's the very first thing that we test for, your general problem-solving ability and how you communicate. Number 2 is your related experience. Obviously, if you're applying for a sales role, we would love for you to have some sales experience. Yeah, and we will test you on that. The third piece is your leadership. I'm not talking about how many people you manage. I'm talking about you're surrounded by peers, but you are the person to step forward and own a problem. You are the person to show that even though officially it has nothing to do with me, but I want to fix it. I want to act like it's my problem. That leadership that you can show at any level, right? Any level you can show that leadership. It doesn't have to be I'm managing 30 people, across 5 countries. And then the last piece is what we call googliness. Googliness is a funny term. It's been parodied quite a bit. But in my opinion, googliness is I am comfortable in a fast changing environment where there aren't many rules, and I will always do the right thing, even if it's hard. And so we have questions to test. How would you show these values? Right? How would you show these behaviors? My peers all think I should do X, but I know myself, I shouldn't do that. It's not right. I need to do the other way. Or my manager's left and I've only been here for a month. I'm going to panic. Or do I go, I've been here for a month. I know something. This is what I'm going to do about it. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to do something about it. So it's that mindset that we're looking for. So in summary, those are the 4 attributes for any role at Google. Doesn't matter whether it's technical, non-technical, whatever. We always look for those 4 attributes at Google. Okay. If you pass those interviews, we all sit down, right? And we discuss final checks. Are we 100% sure this person is right for Google? Because even if we're only 90% sure, let's stop a little bit. Let's just review, because if you come into our company or any company in tech, we want you to be there for years. And it's so expensive from a money and time perspective if you get the wrong hire, right? So it has to be 100% right. And I know many people at Google today who've interviewed many times before they found the perfect job, right? So don't get disheartened, if you're applying for roles in tech. And then finally you get the offer and the little funny hat with the propeller. on top, which is always, you know, I've been here for 9 years. I can get quite cynical very quickly, but it's always an amazing feeling, right? When I see someone put on that hat, they just joined, they're really, really happy, and their friends and family are really happy. That's the good part of my job. So I'm conscious we have 10 minutes left, only plenty of time for Q&A and whatnot, but that is basically it for me today. Thank you so much for listening. Apologies for the rambling, but hopefully it was useful.